Well, I'd like to welcome all y'all today. We have Share the Beach Sea Turtle program goes from the Alabama point all the way to our west end at Dauphin Island. So we cover the Alabama coast through this section, monitoring every morning at starting at probably around 5:45. We get out on the beach, patrolling, walking, to find the crawls and then to hopefully find a nest. Now the mama will come up during the night and make her way onto the beach to nest and lay her eggs, and then probably about 55 days after that, then that's when the babies, we are monitoring that as well, to then when the babies will start emerging from the nest. So it can be kind of active. Last season we had 51 nests here on Dauphin Island, 143 along the Alabama coast. So our nesting season starts May the 1st and goes through August, and it can go into October, and that's more not nesting. They end nesting in August, and the hatching can actually take place in October. So we've got a sample here of what a actual nest looks like. So the mama will dig a hole with her back flippers down into the sand, approximately 18 inches, and drops each one of her eggs, approximately 100 eggs per nest. All of the eggs do not hatch, but the majority of them do. We have some samples of what little babies look like up here in different stages. We got some turtle skulls. So our turtles that nest on Dauphin Island are loggerheads, Kemp Ridleys, and the green sea turtle.
So how many nests have you found so far this season?
So far this season we have a total of 4 nests. We have, so we monitor each one of those nests. So June and July are our peak seasons for nesting turtles. So if you do see a nesting turtle in the evening, please contact us at our hotline. I have some information here that I can provide for y'all for the hotline phone number. Call us and we'll come out and secure and make sure she's safe.
So yeah, you mentioned the time for when people go out and are looking for the nests. Why so early in the morning?
Well, the mama comes in during the night, and so we try to get out before people traffic and any of the nests would get disturbed, because that's where we collect all of our data for the width of the crawl, from the water line to the nest, from the nest to the dune line. So we collect a lot of data to provide that to the Fish and Wildlife.
And if the tracks are, that you find them using the tracks, and if the tracks have been, kicked around so that they're not visible anymore, or if there's a big rain shower, you may miss that nest, right?
Sometimes we have, but we do have some eagle eye volunteers on our team, so we do try to identify, because when the turtle comes on shore, you can see it's kind of like a pattern, like a comma. So it's like a little track that's coming up, and she's like swimming on the beach, and so you can see that, and you'll have a little indentation that goes in the middle.
Kind of looks like tractor tire.
It looks like a tractor tire.
And then you can theoretically, I don't know how well it works in practice, if it might be kind of difficult out on the beach, but theoretically you can tell what kind of turtle it is from the tracks too, right? Because some of them go this way and some of them alternate.
Yes, we have alternating on our loggerhead and our Kemp Ridleys. The green sea turtle is straight, and then they have a little tail line that goes in the middle of their section when they're coming onto the beach. So we do measure the width of it, and that also determines somewhat of what species it is. The smaller ones are the Kemp Ridleys, weighing in at about 100 pounds, where our loggerheads, 300-400 pounds, as well as the greens. Big mamas.
I'm sure you're also, a good reason for going out early in the morning is to actually find them before the evidence is obscured, but I'm sure it helps that it's cooler in the morning too.
Well, it does, because it can get quite hot out there. As when we dig down, when we find the nest, we actually go or the clutch. We go down into that to confirm that she has actually laid her eggs. And that's once we find the eggs, then that's when we start documenting it as a active nest.
So you were mentioning to me a little while ago that this morning y'all found a crawl. And what happened after you
Okay,
found it?
so the crawl, the mama attempted to nest, but due to the debris that was in where she had picked to lay her nest was a large piece of styrofoam, which then she didn't like that, so she did not lay her eggs. So then that turns into a false crawl where she attempted to lay, but was unable to do so.
Will she come back?
She will come back. We'll probably have another attempt tomorrow. They don't nest during the day. The only sea turtle that'll nest during the day is a Kemp's Ridley, normally. But we did have a loggerhead Sunday that was very early in the morning. So, and a renter reported to the hotline that there was a turtle on the beach.
Do you tag the turtles?
No, we do not tag them here. Florida, I think, does. If they're injured, they'll go and then they'll get some tags.
You mean the adults or the hatchlings?
The adults. If the adults are injured by being struck by a boat or shark bit or something like that, and they'll go into one of the hospitals, which our closest one is over in Mississippi or Fort Walton.
So usually they're not interacting with the adults because they just find the evidence after the adults have
Yeah.
come, laid their eggs, and then gone back.
The only time we get to see normally an adult is when we're patrolling at night, when we're trying to find, we'll go and nest sit during the night when that we know that nest is going to hatch. And sometimes last year we had several mamas coming on the beach as we were leaving the beach, anywhere from 10 o'clock to midnight. So, and that's always fun to see.
I was wondering if the same turtles may return or some of the babies. I mean, what makes this so special that
Okay, the turtles are from here. Back 10 years ago, they were born and hatched on this beach. So they do come back to their beach that they were nested and hatched on. And the mama will lay anywhere from 2 to 3 times a nest during our season. Yes, sir.
In one season, 2 to 3 times they will come ashore?
Yes, sir.
Oh, wow. Do you mark the nesting places?
Yes, sir, we do. We have, so when you see a nest, it is staked out with a perimeter. We have these signs on it indicating that it is a sea turtle nest, and then we also mark it with green tape to indicate that. So we put it down with wooden stakes, and we have a screen that we also protect where a predator like a fox or a coon or something else won't get into the eggs.
So it takes the baby turtles, the hatchlings, it depends on the species, but it can take, for some of them, 20 years or longer to mature until they are old enough to until they're old enough to lay eggs. And so the turtles that are laying on our beaches, they're maybe 20 years old or older. So if you imagine, how long has the nest monitoring program been active? Do you know?
I think it's been since '08.
Okay.
So we started doing it, but it started out very slow. So we've built it up to get more and more volunteers involved to help the program and to help because all of them are endangered.
And so these species are they're impacted. All these species are threatened worldwide. Turtle species are threatened or endangered, and so their populations have been impacted by human activities. And so there are, programs like this to try to boost their population. And on this end, it's the trying to help ensure that as many of these sea turtles will hatch and survive that end of their life cycle. And then you've got other programs like Kathryn mentioned that will address issues once they get into the ocean, like boat strikes or entanglement or like fishing encounters, things like that. But there are places where their numbers are improving, their populations are increasing, and also it's kind of hard to suss out, what we're seeing here. You're finding more nests. Could be a reflection of the increase in monitoring. Like there are more people out there monitoring. It could be an increase in the success of the turtles coming ashore and nesting, because you will do. Well, I'll come back to that in just a second.
Okay.
But another reason it might be is because the population, we're starting to hit the adult population of turtles once we started, helping the babies survive. And so those babies that were hatching 20 years ago are now coming ashore to nest. And if we had better success with those the hatching success 20 years ago, then we potentially have more mothers coming ashore. But what would you do if you found a nest that was kind of like imperiled by where it was located? So you were talking about flagging it, but every once in a while y'all move a nest, right?
We will relocate a nest, and we have to have, because we are under the federal permit, we have permission to relocate the nest if it's too close to what we call the rack line, where the water will continually inundate that nest and then destroy or mess the eggs up where they won't be hatch. So we do move that, and we're authorized to move it back a ways from where she originally, we don't move it like way over here or anything, we just move it back from where the mother actually nested.
What predators do baby turtles have?
Well, while they're in the nest, they would have either, because humans do get very curious about certain things. Here on the island, our main predator is the fox. And then there's, the raccoon and coyote, stuff like that. When they get out in the ocean, it would be, or, a bird or another fish or shark, something like that. Crabs, yep, crabs.
When they hatch.
Yeah, and we do have the ghost crab. While we're monitoring when it's actually hatching, we do have to keep the ghost crabs and some of our bird species, away from the hatchings while they're making their way to the beach.
Dogs can be a predator when
Yep.
they're in the nest. And Kathryn mentioned the foxes and the raccoons, which you might think of as natural predators. And usually when we are making these concerted efforts to increase populations of certain species, they have been impacted by human activities. So they're not just responding to natural pressures on their population. And so if you hear like fox and raccoon, you might think of that as, natural predators. But humans are doing things that are kind of improving the predators' access to these nests and their chances of impacting these nests. So even though these animals may be, naturally present on Dauphin Island, we may be kind of giving them a human boost in their predation of these sea turtle nests. So, those are in an indirect way human impacts.
Yes, sir.
Do you guys see more nests on the bay side or like the side that faces the ocean?
It's on the Gulf side is where all of our nests take place. I'm not saying that a turtle could not nest on the bay side, but we have no documentation of that for Dauphin Island.
How many volunteers do you have on the Dauphin Island team?
We have on our roster right at 68. So we have quite a few people because it takes, each section is broken up in about a half a mile. So it takes us about 15 one way, 30 minutes round trip. So we get volunteers to patrol each section, and then on the west end we go from the parking lot to the tip, which is roughly 10 miles one way, and we do that on our UTV. So if you see the Share the Beach UTV, that is us.
And then you said approximately 50 days, and there's a reason that's approximate. So if the nest is laid earlier in the season, the temperatures are lower because as you're thinking, if they are laid in May, May is not as hot as July, so it may take them a little longer to incubate than a nest that is laid in July. But after you flag the nest and then you kind of mark the date when it, when it was laid, and then you kind of estimate out when you expect that the nest might hatch. What is the process like for like doing a nest sitting?
Well, prior to the nest sitting, we do monitor the nest. We'll check it on a daily basis because ghost crab, if we have a ghost crab that seems to be interested in it, it indicates that there's activity in the clutch. And for us on the west end, if the fox start coming around, digging around, our screening also indicates. Then there's what's called a depression, where the top of the sand, it will actually drop down like an hourglass in there, and we know that some babies have hatched and are moving around in there. So then once we have those, and we know that the date of 55 days, we start monitoring prior to that just a little bit, just looking. We also use a stethoscope to listen and hear the babies moving in there, so we know how active, if there's just a few kind of moving around in there, or if it's a bunch and it's going to be a full-blown boil. So, and then for our nest sitting, we'll put like a 2-hour nest sit on it because they'll hatch during the night as well because of predators.
So,
after dusk.
you mentioned boil, so often, but not always, they will like boil out together. Can you kind of describe that?
Okay, so it's really kind of interesting. There's one brave little baby turtle in there that pops his head out, and he's called the scout. So he kind of peeks around and looks and sees everything's okay. So then he'll start slowly coming up, and then he gives the okay to the rest of the crew in the clutch, and then that's when we have our boil. They don't necessarily all boil the very first time. It can actually go over maybe 1 or 2 days after the initial boil. And then after 72 hours, we then go in to clean the nest up, find out the data in it, how many hatched, how many, we still sometimes might have live babies in there. We determine about if there's a fungus in there or something that didn't hatch and it was infertile. So we have all that documentation. We send that into the wildlife.
Do you document how many hatched?
Yes, we have to. We have a sheet that we have to list how many's hatched, how many's dead, if we have any that's infertile. Yeah.
So the boil is kind of like a schooling behavior, in that if they're all moving together for any particular individual, it may improve their chances of survival against any predators that are out there waiting, like ghost crabs or sometimes birds.
And so when they do boil, we do ask that folks would turn off their lights because the babies have a tendency to go to the moon or to the light. So we have found that to be also a problem with the moms as well, to get disoriented, and then the babies get disoriented too. So if you'll keep your lights off after 10 o'clock, we'd appreciate that. Also, if y'all walking on the beach, I know everybody likes to look at night for those fun little ghost crabs. The white lights also is a problem on the flashlight. So there is a red turtle friendly light that's I think they have available here at the Sea Lab, or you can get a filter that at least monitors some of that white bright light off, where the mama won't come up on or the babies can't get to the water.
It's not blinding for your eyes either. So
yeah, that's right.
Easier to adjust for seeing at night. And another thing they'll do while they're monitoring that boil is, they don't usually pick up the babies. Usually, it's hard to study sea turtles because their life cycle is so long. So if you think about, I mentioned that it may be 20 years or longer for a turtle to mature, from hatching to, coming back ashore and laying eggs. So as much research as has been done on sea turtles, as much interest as there is in them, there are still a lot of unanswered questions. You think about this in terms of like a researcher's career, to study the life cycle of a sea turtle with long So, one of the things that, and there may be updates, more current research that I'm aware of, you might know, but one of the things that has been shown is that somehow the baby turtles seem to need to crawl across the beach to orient themselves to their, what we call the natal beach,
Yep.
where they hatched, in order to return. And so they usually will not pick up the babies, even if they're kind of maybe veering off a little bit, but they try to make sure that they're going in the right direction and like guard them from any ghost crabs that might approach them.
What we do, Mendel, is we actually have a diagram, a cone that we stay within. So when the babies start getting out of those cones, we have gloves on our hands and we have a special bucket that we are allowed to put the babies in. Then we put them back in the cone to let them complete their cycle of walking out to the water.
Can you talk a little bit about the federal agencies that regulate anybody's, activities, contact with the turtles, and kind of the training and permitting that y'all go through?
Well, our training is with the Federal Fish and Wildlife, and we start our training in April. We have a sea turtle manual that everybody has to read. We have to go through physical training before our season actually starts on May the 1st.
And so they're actually regulated by two different federal agencies because they are found both on land and out in the ocean. And so the one that is
Thank y'all.
Permitting for y'all's activities is the one that is the Federal Fish and Wildlife because they're the ones that monitor them or regulate them on land.
And then we do have the Marine Resources that also is with us.
And so that would be a state as well,
Yep.
state agency
State.
as well. So Alabama Department of Marine Resources.
Yep.
And do you have anything that you'd like? I mean, you mentioned a couple of things like reporting any, potential nesting activity that people might witness while they're on the beach or staying at the beach. The lights, so flashlights and like the lights
of the underneath of the house or the outside of the house, that does, because most of the lights, we're hoping to get something implemented in to have the homeowners to change the lights that's just facing the Gulf, or at least turn them off by 10 o'clock, red lights to.
Yeah. And then, so are there other things that you would encourage people to be mindful of or to do? You mentioned the turtle that had the false crawl because of something she found on the beach. So
this was actually buried into the sand. So we all know that everybody likes to dig holes. So that has become a real issue along all of the coastlines of wherever any turtle is nesting. So, and bringing in your beach equipment. So once again, if you'll just have fun, fill in, dig your hole, just fill it in when you go in, bring in your blankets, your toys and stuff off the beach, because that disorients the turtle or it distracts her. I mean, we've had turtles get actually hung up on beach chairs in the past and, causes damage to her fin or around her head. I mean, it's very disturbing for her and for the public as well.
These sea turtles live almost entirely in the ocean, and they're adapted for their life in the ocean. They have, flippers, rather than feet, and their bodies are really heavy. You think about that thick, heavy shell that is mostly supported by the water, and it's a protection from predators like sharks. So they contend with some very large predators. So these are really big, heavy animals that are adapted for almost 100% of their life in the water, but they come up on the beach to nest, and so they're really awkward on land. This is very labor intensive for the female turtles to come up onto land, and so you can imagine if a turtle comes up and she you know, it's hard for her to walk across the sand
Yes.
and to get far enough up onto the beach to, you know, dig a nest that's beyond the tide. And then she digs, and she's better adapted for life in water. So this is all very labor intensive for her.
It's very.
And then if she's, you know, she's dug down and then she's hit something that, you know, seems like it's maybe going to cause a problem with her laying, and so then she turns around and leaves instead of laying eggs. You can imagine that this is kind of a, you know, it's very energy intensive for her, and so she may not lay as many eggs, you know, as she would otherwise. They do know that they will return and make repeated attempts, but you know, if we leave things out on the beach and every time they come up they encounter these obstacles, you know, this can be problematic. So people are becoming more and more aware of these, you know, issues that sea turtles face, and we're all kind of helping to fill in those holes and remove, you know, beach chairs and umbrellas and toys and things to improve their chances of successfully nesting and hatching. And so, I mean, it's important to make those contributions to their success.
So where do they spend the rest of their time?
In the water.
Out in the
Where?
open
How
ocean.
far
Yep.
out?
So when the hatchlings first go out into the water, a lot of them actually spend time in floating mats of sargassum.
Yes. The annoying seagrass on the beach is very helpful to the baby sea turtles because that's where they hang out. They get their nutrition from there. A variety of other sea life is in there as well, but that's very important for the baby sea turtles. And that's why it comes in at this time.
What about the mothers? Where do they go?
They just go back out into,
How far out?
we don't have them tagged, so we don't know how far, but I would imagine.
Some of them might
Yeah.
go great distances.
Yes, they
won't come
do.
back here yearly.
We've tracked some in Florida, and they do.
Stay underwater.
How long do they stay out?
Underwater. How long
Underwater?
Do they hold their breath?
Gosh.
I don't know actually, but it's
It's a bit. It seems like I had read one time because they sleep at night, and I think it's right around 6 hours. It seems like that's what I had read.
I can't
Because they
remember
trickle their bubbles out. They'll sit up like this and they'll trickle their bubbles out. So
these that we have in jars here, Kathryn mentioned that you can kind of see different stages of development. These turtles didn't hatch, so they were some that were found after the nest was, you know, the rest of the babies in the nest hatched, whichever ones were successful. I actually don't know about those particular specimens. Sometimes the entire nest will be lost by a big tide, a storm that floods the nest, and so they may have gone through, you know, quite a bit of development in the egg, and then the nest
Yes.
is lost. But sometimes some of them don't.
So these are what we consider late stage. And so this is also documented in our data form at the excavation of the nest. They either, more than likely, these had drowned it after a storm surge, and they will, even though they can breathe underwater, they're then trapped in the sand and the water, so then the babies drowned.
So on those two that I just passed around, you can still see like the yolk sac attached to them. This one looks like it's been absorbed a little more. There's not much of that left on there.
It's not, it's just a little, yeah.
But you can also look at like the development of the flippers, and so they just stopped developing for some reason.
And that's all important in our data that we collect. Every egg is taken out of the nest and determined whether it was infertile, late stage, live birth, how many hatched. There's, like I said, the fungus and stuff. It's just a lot of paperwork. It's very time consuming, but it's very rewarding.
Do you ever find an egg that the baby's still alive but it hasn't hatched yet?
Yes.
What do you do with those?
Those stay there.
You just leave them and
Uh-huh.
let them finish hatching?
And they'll eventually come on out too. It's a pip, and it kind of looks like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the question was, for anybody who didn't hear, if you find one and you can tell there's a live baby in it and it hasn't hatched yet, what do you do? maybe your thinking was kind of, do you assist them in hatching? So these are kind of interesting questions about where to draw lines in, in kind of, you could kind of think of it, and this is characterizing it in a particular way, but interfering with the course of nature. So, some of these questions are we trying to reverse some of the impacts that humans have had? But, at the same time, these animals do have natural predators. Those natural predators, they need to eat. And so, there are decisions that have to be made, lines that have to be drawn. Also, some of these may not hatch because of like chromosomal issues. They're, not going to be successful. Where is it appropriate to put effort, and where do you draw the lines about, effort that is not going to be fruitful when you could be putting that somewhere else? So there are a lot of questions about, how to kind of help these animals recover from human impacts, but also kind of consider some of the boundaries within that.
And also consider, trash. The Walmart bags or any of the plastic bags do have an appearance of a jellyfish. So sea turtles do eat jellyfish. That's one of their little items to munch on, along with the crabs and other things. So
Balloon releases.
Balloon releases,
Yeah.
yes, are very hazardous to any, not just the sea turtles, but any of our wildlife. Birds get it tangled around their neck. Sea turtles get it around, or they eat it, and because we've had them actually had so many balloons in their little tummies before. It's just very disheartening.
Yeah, I tend to think of that as one of those issues that people are familiar with, and so people have moved away from doing balloon releases, but I just heard of one that happened locally because there were some folks who were suggesting that they do something different. So I think that maybe we do have some room to get that message out there a little better.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if any of you are staying in any of our local Alabama like beach houses or condos that don't already have this information posted, but she does have
So I
some.
do have some magnets, and y'all welcome to these. It has our hotline on it, just to kind of tell you a little bit about what, if you'd like to take one, post it in your home or the rental house that you're at. Feel free to come up and get it. That's fine. We do have a email that you can sign, the list, and we have a newsletter that we send out because we just also do sea turtles and other like oyster restorations and stuff like that. So this is just a good Alabama Coastal Foundation. So.
I do have some folks who ask me about volunteering with the sea turtle team who are not local. So I think, and I always tell them that really the training and the main effort to get the monitoring team put together is going to require kind of living locally, but there are a lot of things that folks who are visiting can do to help.
Yes, we have, you can adopt a sea turtle nest, or naturally you can make a donation, but yes, to actually participate in our volunteer type stuff, we have to go through training, and we do train each one of our volunteers prior to our nesting season with the manual and then physical training as well.
Do you all have any other questions about sea turtles in general, adults or babies, or the Share the Beach volunteer program? And you are welcome to come up and take a closer look at some of the artifacts that we brought, some skulls. Can anybody tell what these are?
Flippers?
I heard somebody say it.
Flippers.
Does this remind anybody of barbecue?
Ribs.
These are ribs, and these are sea turtle ribs. And so I think that sometimes we don't have any little kids with us here, but we might have maybe one over there. But often in programming for kids, you'll see turtles take their shells off. You know, like Franklin, other turtles will remove their shells and set them aside like it's clothing. Turtles cannot do that. So, do you guys know what a turtle shell is made of? Bone. It's made of bone. And what would be the part of their body that's what bones? The ribs. Okay, so if you feel your rib cage front and back, you can kind of imagine that as a turtle shell, and their shell is expanded to encase their hip bones and their shoulder bones. But it's bone, it's rib, and they could no more crawl out of their rib cage than you could crawl out of yours. Their ribs are fused together to form that shell.
And the sea turtle cannot retract into her or him into their shell like the land turtles. They have the ability to, you know, pull their head in and their legs in. The sea turtles do not.
So you all are welcome to, we kind of spread out, and I actually put that a little too close to the water. But,
yeah, but that's okay.
So, you know, a little beach there, and so they would walk along the beach looking for those kind of like tractor tire looking tracks, and then follow them to the nest. Do you dig up the entire nest and count the eggs?
No, we only count the eggs at excavation. Once we hit the egg, find the egg that's there, then we stop, measure the nest or the clutch, and then start our process of filling it back in, screening and staking off, doing all of our measurements.
So there's a risk to digging up nests a little later. I mean, if they do it and do it immediately, this is
yes,
not,
no.
This particular issue is not a problem, but if you do it later,
and so that's why we do start out early in the mornings, because 9 o'clock is our cut-off date to relocate a nest, due to the fact that the mother has laid that night, the egg is, the baby and everything is adhering to the shell, and we do not want it to be disturbed, unlike the mother has placed it in that clutch.
Is it called a polar? There's something about that attachment site where
Yeah.
the baby attaches to the egg. If you were to then move it and like rotate it so that like the weight of the baby as it's developing is pulling against that.
Yeah, and when we relocate the nest, we have to pull the egg out just like, and put it in another bucket just like she has it. We have to pull the top ones, go on the bottom to then relocate it at another nest that we've measured, and dug another nest to put the eggs in that nest just like the mama had, the same order. So it's very intense.
And then can you talk about the temperature dependent sex determination?
Well, yeah. So the warmer temperatures are for the females. So we have hot chicks and cool dudes. So normally when our nests are in August, the ones that hatch in October will be mostly males. The ones that hatch in June and July will be female.